Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, should taxpayers pay for sexual harassment-funded settlements? And what about the fiscal health of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania? We're going to talk with the Auditor General of the state, Eugene DePasquale. But first, yes, the state Supreme Court has struck down the 2011 congressional boundary lines, but did they create a little chaos in the wake of their decision? We'll get to that with a couple of the state's leading reporters and more after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome back. Well, joining me as often is the case is Angela Couloumbis. She's a reporter with the Philadelphia Inquirer. She covers all things related to the state capitol and Pennsylvania politics. And Marc Levy, he's with the Associated Press. All right, Marc, why don't you, I would suspect that every viewer has to know that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court struck down the 2011 congressional maps. So there are many aspects of this. What's the big takeaway here?
Look, it's a big deal. It's a big year for these congressional races. A lot of people are interested in running. There's a lot of open seats, the most in decades.
Yep.
It was already a crazy year before the state Supreme Court threw out the district lines. And as I understand it, no state court anywhere has ever thrown out congressional districts.
Yeah.
It's a gerrymandering case. The court says it was unconstitutionally gerrymandered.
But now here are a couple aspects to this. Number one, as we tape this, we still don't know the parts, the sections of the Pennsylvania Constitution. So I'm going to get into this in a minute. They've ordered the legislature to redraw the boundary lines, but they didn't even provide, they provided assistance on how to do it. But, is that a little unusual? That they didn't provide it. Now, they did the per curiam, that's the short version, and we still don't have, go ahead.
Well, look, this whole situation is unusual. We have seen the court hand down an order before it sent out an opinion that explained what it did, why it did what it did. So, but having this compressed time schedule to redraw the map, it's ordering state lawmakers to do it. It just makes it chaotic. You have all these people wondering, now I'm running for Congress, which district am I going to live in? And Republicans who are in charge of the legislature are intent on going to the U.S. Supreme Court to get the U.S. Supreme Court to wade into this and put a stop to it.
All right, Angela, here's what's, I think, weigh in on this. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court said that these congressional boundary lines as drawn violated the Pennsylvania Constitution, not the U.S. Constitution. Right. So there's some speculation that even though they've asked the U.S. Supreme Court for a stay, they've now gone to the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court for a stay, that just because it's a Pennsylvania situation that the U.S. Supreme Court might not even grant it if it gets there. Is that what you've heard?
Right. So we've spoken to various constitutional scholars who say that the U.S. Supreme Court will be in a very unique position because it has not weighed in on a state court's decision on redistricting. On the other hand, if they allow this to slide, then the fear is that perhaps other states might find an opportunity to do something similar.
And it does involve federal, in a sense, not in a sense, they're federal elections to federal offices, the House,
maps,
the members of Congress. All right, I got to go to this. Yes, they have the technical capability. I'm talking about the Pennsylvania legislature to do it in 3 weeks. They have the maps. They have the programming. 3 weeks.
Right.
Come on, both of you have been covering the Pennsylvania legislature for a long. 3 weeks.
The last time it took about a year to complete, but that is because there is politics involved in the process, and some politics is allowed to be involved in the process. There are sort of purists who say that, look, it is not that difficult to draw congressional maps that make sense.
Right.
But it is like a piece of legislation. So you do need the 253-member legislature.
Both houses of the legislature, Republican. Yeah. All right. Now, look, here's another point. Shouldn't they at least allow the 14 incumbents who are seeking re-election out of the 18 to come in and testify? Shouldn't they hear from the plaintiffs who took the case to court and open it up for hearings? How about as you point out, you're reporting over 60 people who are running for office. They've been out campaigning for these congressional, they may not even live in the district, for gosh sake.
That's right. And you have a lot of districts that are now incredibly contorted and distended and elongated by virtue of the 2011 map that, that broke decades of precedent. These districts used to be in different places, and if you go back to those, if you move them back to those places, you have a lot of people who might be running for them now that won't be living in them anymore. You don't have to live in a district that you represent.
Yeah, but then you're a carpetbagger, aren't you?
Exactly.
That's the accusation.
It's a political liability. So it is. It's a crazy situation. You can draw a map probably in 30 minutes with the right software that makes sense, but it's the politics that makes it very complicated.
Okay, so back to this. So they've got 3 weeks. Is it February 9? Is that the deadline? And then the governor has until...
The day after Valentine's Day.
Oh, you remember that? Yeah, we all remember that. Well, happy Valentine's Day. Okay. And it's amazing. And then I want to come back to that before we get to Congressman Meehan. We got to run to a break, but I want to ask you one pivotal question. Is it likely that the state Supreme Court could end up doing this? They've threatened it. They've said they will do it if it doesn't get done. We'll be back with that following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Marc Levy and Angela Couloumbis join us. I'm going to turn to you, Marc. Okay. You can't rule out, the state Supreme Court said if you don't get this all done by, is it February 19? I could be off by a day or two on that day.
If the governor doesn't give them a plan by the end of February 15th.
Oh, 15th. They're going to do it.
By February 19th.
The court will do it.
They've invited all the parties in the case to submit plans, and they will theoretically pick one that they think.
What happens if they don't submit plans that are acceptable? Oh, no, who knows, right?
Perhaps the court will pick the one that makes the most sense. There's some precedent for this in 1991 that the same similar thing happened when the legislature couldn't draw a map.
That's right.
It couldn't agree on a map.
I've written about that.
There was a lawsuit, and the court picked from a bunch of maps that were submitted.
Exactly. Good point. All right, what a bombshell. Congressman Patrick Meehan from the 7th Congressional District in Pennsylvania, he's a Republican. It was disclosed that he made that he worked out a sexual harassment settlement with an employee, thousands of dollars out of the congressional fund, out of congressional taxpayer dollars.
Correct.
And this all has gotten a little odd and strange.
Right.
Give us the overview.
So the story dropped like a bombshell on Saturday. It was in the New York Times about this really a secret settlement that Congressman Meehan had done with his aide. Since that time, Congressman Meehan has given interviews with various news organizations.
Particularly the Philadelphia Inquirer, your paper.
Yes, including the Philadelphia Inquirer, in which he effectively said that he considered this woman his soulmate, but that he did not sexually harass her. The allegations are different than what the congressman is saying. Our understanding is that she felt that she was harassed and that her work environment became so unpleasant that she left the job, and not just the job, but she left the country to go start another life.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, this is, in a sense, now there isn't any, I don't think the complaint is that he actually touched her or physically abused her, Mark, not that way, but she obviously must have felt very uncomfortable when he calls, as Angela points out when she says, she was my soulmate. And he obviously, I use the word, and maybe you'll correct me if it's a bad word, smitten with her. Does that make, is that?
Look, he used a lot of different descriptions for how he felt about her, but the bottom line is he talked about he had a very deep affection for her. He wrote a letter to her that he gave to the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Yeah, and it was printed. Yeah,
and it was very overflowing with emotion. He himself used the words that he felt that after 7 years of working with her, that she was his soulmate.
All right, final word to you. Where does this all go? He says he's standing for re-election. Right. The Republican various committees, like the Congressional Campaign Committee and the National Committee and others, they've stepped back.
Right.
But he says he's running, right?
He is. Things can change on a dime on that question. And there is some speculation out there that if he does not pull back on his own, and if this continues to escalate and look bad, that during the congressional redistricting that will occur, that perhaps that district will just be, they will redistrict him out of existence.
Yeah, when they do it. Yeah, that's a great point. All right, I want a great update. Thanks for coming in. All right, we have the Auditor General of the state of Pennsylvania, Eugene DePasquale, on the program. He's coming up next, and we got a couple of interesting questions to raise with the General, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Well, joining me as often is the case, and we're delighted to have him, is the Auditor General of the state, Eugene DePasquale. He's from York, Pennsylvania. So, York, you folks have the governor, you have a guy running for governor, and your statewide office. I won't go there.
Right. I'm just happy where I am. Yes.
I understand. All right. You heard us talk about the Pat Meehan situation. Right. We know what's going on in Congress, and there's rising concerns about it, to put it bluntly. But we don't think too much of it in the state legislature. But you have a clear position which you've articulated, and you want to do something about it. Now, remember, sexual harassment settlements using
taxpayer dollars. And so, for starters, I, as a former member of the legislature, I want to be clear, and I would bet that when we first found out about this, 90% of the legislature didn't even know there was a fund there to pay for this. And so when I found out about that, now as the chief fiscal watchdog for the state, it was outrageous. And to me, first of all, sexual harassment.
It was that secret.
It was that secret. Members, I guarantee you, there were members in the legislature as the settlements were happening that didn't know about it. I guarantee you. It's outrageous. First of all, the most important thing about sexual harassment is it doesn't happen, and the victim needs to be taken care of. I mean, that's the most important thing. But then you get into, okay, the next steps is that literally elected officials have this secret slush fund to pay off the victims, and that is completely unacceptable. We found something similar when I did an audit of the Philadelphia Parking Authority, and we went in and recommended new training and new personnel, new policies to combat sexual harassment there. What I've said is I'm willing to go in, audit the legislature and specifically look at.
But they won't let you do that, will they?
No, but even if it was limited to just how they should handle sexual harassment.
Now, you were in the State House. Why would they not want, I understand,
some things,
autonomy and separation of powers, and they don't want guys like you not in the branch. I
get that, but on this issue, you would think I would agree to be limited to just tackling sexual harassment. And for starters, there should be one place where victims get to go. It shouldn't be all four caucuses having their own thing. There should be one thing for victims to go to. It shouldn't be dictated by leadership.
One important question. Where does it stand? Is the legislature going to stop the practice? The legislative leader is going to end the practice?
I am not convinced they are. I hope they are, but right now there's no guarantee that they will stop the practice.
All right. Let's quickly turn to the fiscal health of the Commonwealth. It looks like the revenues being generated are slightly above what they were last fiscal year. You know the situation that existed where whatever it was, you know more than anybody in the state about it, $2.2 billion deficit. Here we go. The governor's going to have to make a recommendation soon to the General Assembly about a new budget. In in a couple of sentences, what's the fiscal health?
It has gotten, this fiscal year, it looks better, meaning the revenues are coming in for the first time in at least 5 or 6 years. The revenues are beating projections, so that's a good thing. Too many of our budgets have been delayed recently. Too many of our budgets have relied on borrowing. That hurts the fiscal health of the Commonwealth. Whenever you have to borrow to pay day-to-day bills, it's just like taking out a credit card just to pay your light bill. That's a problem. It's hurt our credit rating, and people say, okay, well, why do I care about our credit rating? That makes everything we do in Pennsylvania more expensive. It's less bridges we get to fix. It's less schools we get to fix. So that practice has to stop, and I think the current track puts us on the best path to not having that happen.
Yeah, and given an election year, I mean, last year's recommendation by the governor was 1.8% increase, fairly modest. I think now we're in an election year, so you wouldn't expect that there's going to be some huge spending increase or big taxes. Maybe the governor would probably recommend the tax on Marcellus Shale, as you would expect. But all right, I got to turn to another subject. We'll probably get interrupted by the need to go to a break. You have been consistent in your call to regulate and tax marijuana.
That's right. Absolutely. First of all, there's several states that have already done this, and the numbers are in. Colorado, which I think should be the model for Pennsylvania legislatively, a state that we are 2.5 times the size of. They brought in $129 million in new revenue. They've actually cut costs because now they're not throwing people in prison. And here's 2 other things, even if you say it's not just about the numbers, and I can appreciate that. Teen usage went down in Colorado, and opioid addiction went down.
Because they legalized it, regulated, and taxed it.
That's right. And another thing, you get sort of the street thug out of the game because you're now making it.
Well, I know one thing. The millennials like you because of the various age groups.
I have heard from a lot of legislators that say their kids that are in college are now calling them saying to support me on this.
Even if you're not in favor of it, I think there's one thing that has always bothered me. I've spent my whole career, as a college professor, and therefore, working with millennials. I don't think anybody's life ought to be ruined because they have a couple of ounces of pot in there. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. A couple of grams, or
literally, some people can't be school teachers because they got arrested for. To me, like,
we're not talking about pushers and dealers.
Right. I get that. So, sort of, some kid makes a mistake in college. Now they can't be a school teacher. It's ridiculous.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the continuing fight to deal with the opioid crisis and more with the Auditor General of the state.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives.
Welcome back. My special guest is Eugene DePasquale. He's Pennsylvania's Auditor General. We're going over a couple of important topics. All right, I want to talk about the continuing opioid crisis, the fight. I mean, the numbers I hear are off the charts. And you know what the good thing is? Democrats and Republicans agree. Go ahead. What are you doing with it?
During the Wolf administration, I think this has been the most bipartisan issue with the Republican legislature and the Democratic Governor Wolf. We've done one area, because we audit obviously the state money. We did a 3-department audit on this: Corrections, Human Services, and Department of Drug and Alcohol Protection. And we saw one of the biggest concerns we had, and it was specifically with Department of Drug and Alcohol Protection, was that they were giving grants out to rehab facilities, but not tracking which ones were working. So regardless of which ones were showing a track record of helping reduce addiction, they were all still getting the grants. So because of that audit, they're putting new guidelines in place so that the ones that are being effective are going to be the ones that get the grants. But look, at the end of the day, this is a crisis for all of Pennsylvania.
There are mixed. I get mixed reports. Are we winning this battle yet?
I would hate to say
maybe an unfair question.
I think it's obviously you're allowed to ask whatever you want. I think, and I don't mean it that way, but this is a problem that is going to be a decade to fix because it was so deep and so bad that. So I think what we are now it's maybe not so much a winning or losing. We're now significantly more coordinated.
Yeah, and I think everybody, the medical community, consumers, all kinds of work. Now there's much more of an acute awareness of the problem. But I mean,
you can't fix a problem if you don't know it exists.
Here's the way. If you take your own family and then you extend it out. Is there anybody that can't say they don't have a problem? That someone,
no.
If not, in the nuclear family, then in the extent, or am I wrong about that?
We used to have this joke in college, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, where how many actors to get to Kevin Bacon.
Right.
And so I'm not comparing the two situations, but to get to how many degrees before you have somebody related to with a drug problem, it's not going to be 6 degrees.
All right, before I let you go, what are you working on with child protection? I know that's an important topic for you.
Yeah, we are going county by county. We did a State of the Child report. We found the child abuse hotline had 58,000 unanswered phone calls. We've done a whole series of reports, meeting with, now we're going county by county, meeting with caseworkers. Luzerne County, their office was actually bombed. You have 90% turnover in your county.
What's the problem?
Well, you have caseworkers that feel that they can't, they're falling. This is where the opioids come in. You have despair in so many families. You have addiction in the family. Kids waking up, their parents are ODing, and now the kids are now part of the Children and Youth Protection System, and the caseworkers are getting overwhelmed. We're meeting county by county with caseworkers and county officials and county commissioners. So this spring we're going to come out with what we're going to call our Marshall Plan on how to address this.
I must tell you, when you take the combination of that and child abuse, every day, it seems I read about something, in the local papers about somebody being arrested for child abuse. And I'm not talking about that situation nationally.
That's a whole other debacle.
But I mean, is that what you find? Look, you travel as much around this state. You get that's your job to make sure the money's spent. But there are human considerations here.
The child protection system in Pennsylvania is right now the most unknown, although we're fighting to make it known, unknown disaster in Pennsylvania. Kids and the counties don't have the resources, and so they're literally every day trying to put their fingers in. Do we need
new laws, or do we need to put the resources in and to make sure that it's being implemented properly?
I think it's more the latter. I think it's resources, it's training, it's having more staff, and giving the staff the proper tools and better coordination with law enforcement.
Yeah. Are you optimistic or pessimistic? Short run, it's going to get resolved.
I believe we're going to tackle this, but it's going to take time.
Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in. You're always welcome on the program anytime you have news with your audits and whatever else you do. Make sure you give us a ring, and you'll come in and talk to the folks. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, you stay well.